shortly after getting back to Ireland, 2007 therefore, it must have been some Sunday afternoon. I've been celebrating in one of the churches around here, and you had in the house the Song of Bernadette, and we watched it, and I had seen it when I was about 13 or 14, and I remember, because that was still the time of high-powered evangelical Protestantism, that had made me think, because for the first time you saw here what for us was an ordinary woman doing things in heaven and saying things which were a bit irritating for Protestant ears. And because of the simplicity of this girl, Bernadette, well presented in this historically sort of accurate film, it does actually make one reflect, even as a Protestant, because say what you like, if that's true, you've got to take Our Lady seriously. Now, as a result of that, I remember the following afternoon, helping Dad there in the garden with this film going round and round and round in my mind. That means that heaven is far closer to earth than we can possibly imagine. The life inside a convent is totally orientated towards prayer. There are people on earth who do nothing but give themselves to penance. There is a whole army of people in the Catholic Church giving themselves day and night to the invisible. And Our Lady seems to be on side. That was very different from what we've been told to believe in the Protestant centre, that monks and nuns were a waste of time and not faithful to the gospel. But there was more. In this film, I was very irritated by things which presumed that Our Lady is actually far more than just a woman. The fact that this little girl went to this rather gruff but nevertheless good priest and said what the name was without knowing what she was saying or what it meant and trying to remember the syllables as she had heard them, the fact that he copped on straight away when he heard that I am the Immaculate Conception, that there was more here than met the eye. Now, as a result of that, not straight away, but I started to drift back towards this new discovery of saints. And quietly, in free moments, I would drift towards the Central Library in Cardiff, where on the open shelves, therefore consultable, there were those volumes of the lives of the saints by Butler. And starting at A, I went into it bit by bit. Bernadette was fairly near the front. A good while later, when eventually my grandfather died, I decided, without telling my parents, to go just over the border from where we were, Llanwellyn, to Oswestry, which is in England, for the day, and go into the library of that bigger town. And I found the story of Bernadette and of Lourdes. The detail was very interesting indeed. And in this book there were many, many stories about similar things. a fact in itself which was very uncomfortable. All those years in Protestantism had not had anything similar to offer. The mystical. The mystical was actually presuming a Catholic context and dogmatic basis. Heaven speaking in Catholic terms and doing things to underline specifically Catholic points. That was all new stuff. That same day, I remember asking, actually, in the cafe where I was having a bite to eat at midday, I saw a clergyman who looked sort of Anglican. I asked him discreetly as I was going out of the cafe, where is the Catholic Church? And he indicated exactly where it was. So I ambled in that direction and went in. And I remember just walking into that sacred and very different edifice, being struck by a density of otherness which was quite tangible and palpable, compared with what I knew going into a Protestant place of worship, which is full of the real absence, compared with what I was feeling there without knowing it. And I gazed at the altar and looked at what was enthroned in the midst, in the middle between 6 candlesticks. This strange container with a light burning. And somehow something was telling me you ought to be kneeling. And I walked towards it, and it was as though there was something in there looking at me. I wandered further and knocked at the door of the house next door, which actually said in Welsh, Caer Nef, the field of heaven. And this good lady opened the door, and I asked her 1 or 2 questions. It was a good Irish lady who was housekeeper there. She gave me a prayer book, the prayer book actually of St. Martin de Porres, to read, and I sent it back by post eventually, having read it from one end to the other, and gleaned many things en route. But she, in her simplicity, was quite happy to speak, and she came out with 1 or 2 things. She gave this story just as she was standing there on the doorstep. Yes, things happen. Not long ago there were these communist soldiers coming in. It was some of these communist countries down in Asia. I forget which one it was now, it doesn't make any difference. And they asked somebody in there, "Where's your guard?" And that person just calmly pointed towards the tabernacle of which I've just been speaking, and said, "He's just there." And apparently they shot at the tabernacle immediately, and from what she told me, if I remember rightly, dropped down dead. Interesting. Interesting indeed. Eventually, the good priest, Father McManus, appeared. He'd just been doing something, and he started to answer a few questions, which were very Protestant. The Pope, by the way, it's a day to be talking about the Pope, isn't it? We're all phoning about what happened today. That's not the story. The way he put it was this: no, it wasn't just a question of giving a leadership to that group of people. The Lord knew full well that that leadership would be needed. That, by the way, in its simplicity, is what keeps us safe in mind now. We don't look at the person, but at the power. Because that power, once it's safeguarded by an election, is the same. The infallibility is attached to the office. Therefore, there will be a period when, just for about a month or a fortnight, the see will be vacant, and the figure of Benedict will not be that of the Pope. The power is divine and happens only under certain circumstances. demands a tremendous vision of faith. The promise actually, and this is what I was copying on to, is actually based on divine authority and wisdom. The gates of hell will not prevail against it. So in simple terms, this good priest was coming out with that. The Catholic Church is of a different order. Now, he just said this: you ought to go and speak to your local priest, because we were way away from home in Cardiff. That's what happened eventually, after having talked to my minister, who, by the way, when I told him at the end of a prayer meeting there, he looked at me and with eyes like saucers said in Welsh, "You want to become a what? A papist?" A papist. His reaction was, "It'll pass." He made me stay put for 3 months. I went back to him. It had not passed. So eventually, going with Dad, he was going to chapel, and I asked him to put me down to Catholic Church. So I walked in, and that was by now in Cardiff. And it happened to be, just happened to be, time for the High Mass, still in Latin, although after the Council, and these good Benedictine monks. So I approached one of them as he was pulling the bell, big bell to call people to the next Mass. There were about 5 or 6 on a Sunday, one after the other. And with a big grin from one ear to the other, wanted to know what I was about. So he took me under his wing, and eventually it was sorted out. Some time later, I found myself in Rome, by then having been received into the church in their monastery in Ampleforth, on a pilgrimage. And do you know who it was who was guiding the pilgrimage? This is going quite a few years later now. That same good priest, Father McManus. I saw him straight away. I was sitting next to him on the bus. Do you remember a little boy coming up to you in the year 1969? Oh, I do actually. I told him the story. Ah, he was glad it had borne fruit. Now, I want to go a little bit further. Lourdes. Do you know that at Lourdes, it was the second part of a series in what had started at Lourdes, the beginning of the Marian era, Marian age. 1830 was the start. On the medal, pray for us, no recourse to thee. But what's the first part? O Mary. Now, do you see, when a few years later she came back, I am the Immaculate Conception, there's a link there. And in fact, Catherine Labouré, who is still alive, said when she heard and saw what was going on, "C'est la même!" It's the same one. And it was by then, just after, because it was 1854 that Blessed Pius IX had proclaimed the dogma of the Immaculate Conception, that was confirmation, and there was more to come. Do you know why this dogma is important? The dogma of the Immaculate Conception has more to it than meets the eye. How is she presented in the images of the Immaculate Conception? Always fulfilling the word given in Genesis with regard to the serpent. You will crush its head, and he will have a go at your heel. Now, that's precisely what one sees in the conception of one member of our race who was not in any way contaminated. It's the first reversal of Eden, and therefore she is the second Eve, giving birth to the second Adam. Now, that is actually extremely important in salvation history, because it means that at that point in time, by anticipation of what was going to be rectified finally in Calvary, there was a victory over the hatred that was trying to get at us, that fundamental envy and green hatred of Satan. for humanity that was taking his place. Therefore, that one of our race should have had the victory totally over Satan is a very important moment in salvation history. Now, I just want to finish with a third point, which is a practical one. Do you know that right now, that fundamental hatred between Satan and the one that in a sense has taken his place as the most glorious creature under God, that is, God is not a creature at all. The most beautiful thing ever made, first of all, was the angelic Satan before his fall, that was Lucifer, who had therefore this tendency to want to glorify himself, and then Our Lady, who takes his place and is more glorious, therefore he hates her with a perfect hate. And the battle is on in this Marian age. Never before have we had such a frequency of intervention of Our Lady upon earth. She is leading the battle, and hence this part of it, the Mary Moment of Priests, is important. She has her army, and she is trying to shield humanity against the enemy of the soul. The enemy of the soul, right now, has more liberty and freedom and activity than ever before in history. There is a cosmic battle going on before our eyes, and it's actually far more present than one thinks. I just want to quote a few things before I finish. This testimony came to me by chance this very day by somebody who had come to me for confession and a talk. It is a message of hope, but confessions of an ex-Satanist. Confessions of an ex-Satanist, Deborah Lipsky. And she, only 2 years after her conversion to the faith and exodus from this quagmire of Satanism, writes this book with the inside story and a clear warning that there's more going on than we think, and that we're more exposed to it than we think. This, therefore, is the battle that the Immaculate is fighting with us and for us. We collude with the enemy of the soul in certain specific areas, and we don't even think of it. Anger draws in demons like blood does for sharks, because it is a very powerful emotion that emits negative energy. It resonates with demons. Demons thrive and do their best work in an atmosphere charged with anger. The first tactic they will employ to escalate this negative energy is to prevent you from exploring the logical and rational side of things. Observe a person in anger, how rational he is. There is a certain amount of thought tampering going on. Demons play on our thoughts. They do so indirectly, but they do so. And they know how to have access and have influence, not directly, I'd say, but through blowing on things which favour his gain. In a situation where crowds are together, where temperatures are rising through frustration, e.g., in an airport queue, in a traffic jam, in an explosive and dangerous situation where emotions on a collective level run high, and actually even football matches are mentioned here, when things heat up. The demons are very much around, blowing on these embers, and then they have more freedom to act. They are very present in situations of frustration and explosivity. Arguments in public places with observing onlookers attract clusters of demons that sense the negative emotions of fear, anger, apprehension, and confusion of the bystanders. The provoking of people to say certain things. Now, she goes into quite puzzling detail, and it's worth going into the same detail. She mentions 5 expressions which are actually inviting the demons in, and they're not shy to come in on the invitation. Top 5 expressions that act like a dog whistle, summoning the hounds of hell. 1, very frequent, God damn it. In this phrase, you are directly asking that the creator of the universe curse someone or something into hell forever. It is said in an atmosphere of anger where no love is present, only hate. If you derive some sort of satisfaction from using that expression, that satisfaction means you are under the influence of demonic thought tampering. If saying it gives you a sense of power, you are tapped into the mindset of demons. To a demon, this selfish, unholy request means that you have the audacity to ask God to commit an evil act on your command. In essence, you are ordering God to do your dirty work. 2. Why don't you just drop dead? By saying this, you're actually pronouncing a form of a curse on someone else because you're wishing for them to die. She goes into even what goes on in school playing fields and classes, people being called loser or moron. To actually feel delight in someone else's pain is a character trait of demons. To laugh at someone's misfortune after telling them to drop dead is an obvious telltale sign that they are under the influence of a cluster of demons. Having friends or people support or encourage such behaviour means there's a cluster of demons at work within that group. 3. I swear to God. This expression means that you are making an unbreakable vow in front of God regarding your innocence. The travelling community uses things like on my mother's grave and that kind of thing. On the life of my son. Got very strange expressions. Jesus himself warned against swearing to God in Matthew 5:33-37. So you know that quotation. To use this expression to hide behind a false innocence is disgusting. Not only are you trying to lie, but you are manipulating the other person's trust by getting them to believe that God is vouching for your innocence. This expression is a favourite of demons everywhere. 4. Hocus pocus. Mainly, this phrase is used in magic tricks, but every now and then I hear it when someone says something to the effect, there's a lot of hocus pocus going on there. No Catholic should ever use this phrase, as it is a derogatory corruption referring to the Eucharist. Hoc est corpus. This is my body. Protestants back in the Middle Ages, well, that's a bit out of time there, but still, used this corrupted term to mock the Holy Eucharist celebration of the Mass. They would hurl this insult not only at clergy, but also Catholic lay people on their way to Mass. That's a little bit after the Middle Ages, because we said that it changes about 1500. 5. This one is not very nice, so I'll just let you imagine what it is. Kiss my something. But there's more to it than meets the eye. I saved this expression for last because it is especially vulgar. Sadly, it is such a common expression in our society today, spoken to show defiance. It is better known to Satanists everywhere as the, now there's a Latin expression here, the infame kiss in Latin, or kiss of shame, infamous kiss. During the traditional black Mass, this was considered a symbolic requisite towards earthly success. Participants would literally kiss the bare behind of the devil, usually the high priest conducting the Mass. Nothing gets a cluster of demons charging headlong towards somebody faster than using excerpts from the Satanic Mass. Now, this book is a plethora of testimonies of how present Satan is everywhere and what invites him in directly. I just conclude, every time that we decide to expose our immortal soul to something which is a sacrament of hell, something which is infested with demonic messages, energies, images and sounds, we are playing the devil's game. And we, fervent Christians in inverted commas, are doing it more than we think. Every time we open the internet, we are opening the jaws of hell potentially. I don't mean we do, but potentially we can be. And not every good, pious soul resists. Every time we're online, we're in league with invisible demons trying their best to solicit our attention. The first thing that comes up in the margin somewhere will be some bit of pornography in some shape or form, wanting our attention. And there are subtle ways of getting it because it moves and it does things. Do you see how clever he is? He's everywhere because the computer is in everyone's house, pocket and every shop. It's around. It's potentially a link with the inferno itself. Television. Be careful, because it's not just one channel. When I was growing up, it was just the BBC. Now it's the whole world, just by touching something. And you don't know what's going to hit you when you change into some other channel. You can just like that get into the worst pornography just by an accidental switch of the thumb. Again, it's potentially demon-filled. The air is full of electrified demons. Go into a shop, go onto a bus. What will come into your ears? Listen, or if you want to, don't listen to the words. It's all, or most of it, vulgar and base. Again, under the influence of somebody who wants to fill our imagination with other messages. Something full of hell. We don't have to be all the time exposed to all that. Because even if we have a radio on in the home, be careful there, because it's not necessarily full of blasphemy directly, but over a long time it's full of erosion, it's full of other messages, a way of thinking, a mindset which is what? Fundamentally orientated towards damaging the soul. RTE is doing the demon's game without knowing it. It's conditioning people by the million. Isn't the devil clever? Just be aware, every time we collude, we are losing the battle, at least for our own soul. So I just finished, my friends. There's more to this feast than meets the eye. Remember these things next time you open some channel of ungrace. Because once you've seen it, it's in our mind forever.